Welcome to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM in Guelph, Ontario, Canada, and on podcast on all the major podcast platforms. I'm Paul Smith, one of the hosts of Food Farm Talk with Emily Duncan and Abdul Rahim Abdullahi. Please follow the podcast and our social media feeds. In this episode, the excellent and insightful agri-food power panel discussion continues on the topics of markets, sustainability, and public policy incentives. Mel Luymes chairs the panel of very knowledgeable people in Ontario agriculture. Crystal Mackay, an agriculture communicator, Dan Petker, a Norfolk farmer, Cher Mereweather, president of Provision Coalition, a food sustainability partnership, and Alfons Weersink, economics professor at University of Guelph. This discussion is inspired by Roger Martin's ideas in his book, When More Is Not Better. This is the fourth and final of 4 episodes focused on the ideas raised by management guru Roger Martin in his talk at the Midwest Cover Crop Council Conference on February 24th, 2021. These are made available courtesy of Soils at Guelph.
Is there some sort of a 2-tiered system going on here too, though? Like, Crystal, not all consumers are willing to pay $1.80.
That's right.
Well, do we just make more people care, or?
A little bit, I would say. So a few years ago, a big animal health company did a big global study of food buyers around the world and studies. And basically what they said was 94% of people are food buyers based on price first. And then 4% of people were more elite buyers based on what I call adjectives, free from, et cetera, right? So the adjective buyers, adjectives are very, very expensive in food. So that's only 4%, but not to discount it, because 4% at a huge premium can be very profitable. And then 2% were the activist component, which hate everything basically. So that still left 94% in the food buyer category. But if we use that fair trade coffee example, it was a long game, to Roger's point, to a new solution, to say we've had commodity coffee always, just like we have commodity corn. But to create that new solution included a visit to the farms, an investment of the buyers in the sustainable practices, and with the acknowledgement, which Cher buys into this as well, it's not perfect. It's meant to be continuous improvement, and to say we're doing better because of this. It included education of the people back in the grocery stores so they could talk to customers. It is not a short term, you're going to make a buck and get out. It's definitely a long game.
Cher, what do you think about that?
You know what, I think as we start to see things like the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative, which is a global initiative, and the pressure on the system for transparency and responsible sourcing, I think it is going to become the new normal. And I think that if we pretend that the commodity markets will prevail, I think we're being foolish. And the reality is that the expectation from the consumer, whether they're willing to pay for it or not, is that my food is safe, it's high quality, and it's produced in a sustainable way. And that's my expectation of the new normal. And am I willing to pay more for that? Some will, but I would say that the movement towards it being the new normal will become the normal.
And what's that going to mean on the farm, Alfons or Dan?
I think part of it is just it's good. It's good for agriculture that there's going to be a greater differentiation. I think what Roger talked about in terms of this bell curve, in terms of almost everything, and the pushing down of the middle of that, is something that we've seen occur dramatically in agriculture as well. Throughout the whole agri-food supply chain. You can think about the number of craft breweries that have arisen, and but if the sector was going to just focus on commodity agriculture, on number 2 yellow corn, they're low margins, and there's not that many that will be able to play that game. So it's good news that there's going to be different things that people want, and I agree with Cher. I think that percentage that people are going to be interested in that will grow, and some of it's going to be forced on them.
Is there an easy way for Dan to get paid more?
grow marijuana, right?
Asking for a friend, because
asking for a friend. Hypothetically, let's call him Dan. I would say one thing I'm really hopeful about, and I'm starting to see the titanic shift on it, is agriculture being presented as a solution to environmental issues and climate change instead of just always being blamed as the problem. And the people in this conference know better than anybody on the planet, literally, how agriculture can be part of the solution. But your voice hasn't been heard, and it hasn't been positioned that way. So I feel there's a huge opportunity to take back some of the, not only the moral high ground, which we've lost to critics, quite frankly, on this topic, but also the economic grounds to say, things like carbon credits and what are you doing to actually improve the environment, and how can we be positioned as part of the solution, which I think could be a huge system shift to be a better option than A or B that we have now.
Totally agree. And it's, and it's a bit of forward thinking on, let's say, the farmers who are engaging in some of these practices, because we are taking on additional cost to the business. So we lose like that machine efficiency. But like in Roger's book, that's a little bit of friction, right? So when you have a little bit of friction, it makes us all work a little bit better, a little bit smarter, a little bit different. So, I mean, like my cover crop costs, like for seeding or any kind of bits of yield loss, like which I've had, or any of these things are now acceptable within our own company, and actually desired, because it makes us do different things smarter. So now we target our tillage into strip till, or we no-till, or we very target everything now. Yeah. Just so that those frictions actually work a little bit better, and soon they become smooth, and they just become, wrote into the business, and the business is still successful. And then we have to find the next friction and take it on. Like, just find it, make it, and go.
It's funny that you're making a friction, but I mean, around the world, necessity is the mother of invention. But yet you're almost forcing yourself to you're putting yourself in a position where you have no other option but to be really smart.
Yeah, like stagnation kind of ends a lot of businesses, a lot of farms, a lot of like relationships even. Well, it's just kind of like these are things that apply to everything.
Yes, no, it's true. Another thing that stifles innovation, as I've heard, like in Europe, there's lots of more subsidies for agriculture, and there's very prescriptive about what you need to do in order to qualify for it, and it's killed innovation in at least
in a way.
Some sources that say that, but no, go ahead, Dan.
Well, so it hasn't killed innovation; it's just redirected it. Yeah. Let's take European cash croppers don't grow any GMO corn.
Yeah.
Their regulations for like pesticide and chemical applications are like amazingly, well, to me, insane in a way, but they're there for a reason, right? Like because they have a different paradigm. But you go look at their sprayers, and they're light years ahead of what we can buy in North America. Like, by far. So innovation is happening in a different way.
Because of the regulation that created.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's absolutely amazing. Like, I would love a European sprayer. Like, why would I want this North American crap? Because you can do so much more with that tool in our system.
Yes.
I just can't afford the thing.
Yeah. I was using the idea of incentives more as a segue. Sure. And Alfons, I'd love your thoughts on this. The idea that is resiliency its own reward, and I can see like a lot of Roger's examples were short term, where you could demonstrate it within a few quarters. But is resiliency its own reward, or is there a way to incentivize this without also creating another unintended consequence? Does anyone have?
Incentivize for what purpose? So, for example, I think you talked about in terms of soil health, the crop insurance versus non-cover crop sort of soil practices. Well, then you can think of it more as self-insurance. Okay, I'm going to plant cover crops because they build resilience into the system, and I won't have to rely on crop insurance. So that's one way of where the incentives are targeted towards soil health, and the individual farm profiting from that. But I think a lot of the incentives, increasingly, the ones that you mentioned for the European Union, are meant to deal with externalities off the farm. So the Lake Erie example that Roger mentioned, in the 70s and burning, but, the algae blooms now are largely associated with agriculture. So what are the incentives that can be put in place to deal with that? And, then there are issues, well, if you want to plant cover crops, how do you design a program that will encourage that? And so there is some of that, but there's a reason for trying to create some incentives to get people to change practices in the way that the public desires.
Mm-hmm.
So how long do we keep it? Sorry, no, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dan.
Because I think about this stuff a lot. I'm like, so incentivizing is great. But when does that kind of the penalty come?
Yeah.
So let's say we have these programs now in Ontario for leads. Like we can buy this stuff and get cost share, but some of these programs have happened before, and people buy new drills, like no-till drills, when all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's a little yield drop. I'm going to go start working my farms again, but still use this drill that I got for half price. So that person gamed the system.
Yes.
And we in the neighborhood all know that this person, or maybe I did it. I don't know. I've gamed other systems, but there's been no penalty. So we can always incentivize. I'm trying to get my son to potty train. He can, number one. Number two, we're working on. But I'll keep giving him gifts. So now he's going to start. He knows that he can game the system a bit. So when the toys run out, where does the poo go?
Yeah.
I don't. Hopefully it becomes ingrained that he wants to go this way.
I love it.
Sorry.
I didn't expect a potty training example. I'm just going to say you got me there, Dan. I would say it's if you look at it, things when you want to lead in a direction, you start with incentives, right, and bonuses, and follow the dollar. Then people will go there. Then the next line of thinking comes with it's the cost of doing business. You get that next after the incentive's gone, or for those that didn't sign up first, it's just the cost of doing business. This is how you have to do it. And then you get to the penalties, right? So the laggards, unless it's regulated or customer demands it, they're never going to sign up. So you kind of have the three categories. So if you can create innovative approaches with incentives to start, to get enough of a movement towards it, to show the people in the middle of the bell curve, where I went through university, by the way, Alfons, the people in the middle of the bell curve, that this is a good place to be, and there's enough proof that it's not too crazy that I'm going to shift to. And then the laggards will never get there unless you regulate them, right?
And then the regulation at the last.
Exactly.
Cher, is that how that works in food processing too, Cher? How do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something very similar, right? That we want to incentivize the progressive companies that can create what I call the full of the herd mentality, right? They get that incentive to create the path for everybody else to follow. And then we lose the incentives. It becomes sort of the cost of doing business and so on. That's exactly what we're seeing, certainly in my part of the food system, for sure. I also like this notion where government steps in and says, you know what, we're going to create these opportunities, but we're going to let the consumer vote on which ones they like the best. And so they create this friction in the system that says, this is the change we want to create, but we're going to let the people vote. I like those kinds of incentives too.
Does that rely on an educated public, though?
Not always. I mean,
Okay.
you let the public vote for something, and if it connects with them on a values system, there's a great example in the Our Food Future initiative, which is to create the first circular food economy in the city of Guelph, County of Wellington. And what they've been doing is saying this is one of the things that we want to happen in our local municipality, and here's how we're going to create some food security in an urban environment. Hey, community, vote for your favorite projects. And those projects get punted to the top and they get money.
Something that's been coming up in the chat is just the idea of Canada being like a small fish, but really the Canada brand is a trusted source of wholesome, healthy food. Does that work to our advantage in some way? What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously it's not just Canadian consumers.
Well, I have strong feelings about this, but we only have a few minutes, but I'll give you the Cole's notes of it would be, first of all, our country has invested very little in the Canada brand at home. Most of the Canada brand money that the government has spent, and trust me, I've tried to apply for it, is like, oh, it's too bad the Real Dirt on Farming wasn't for a global audience. We would have funded it. It's like you have to have social license at home to grow the food before you're allowed to export it, right? So this concept of if Canada has this world reputation for safe, healthy, affordable, high quality food, which we do, and we have
On the side of butter now, all of a sudden.
Yeah, except don't get crazy. I wasn't going to mention Buttergate, so don't even, don't tweet about it. But if we say we do have that reputation internationally, so we absolutely should be using it. The individual companies use it to their advantage, and they put a Canadian flag on everything, right? So at home now, we need to start pumping it up to maintain this 82% greater support for Canadian products. A year from now, when people forget about they were sourcing local, to say we need that to become a habit to support your neighbors. Absolutely, and it needs investment and strategy. It can't be just, oh yeah, Canada's great, carry on. That definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different results, applies to many things, and that would include supporting the Canadian brand.
Anyone else want to chime in?
No.
Dan, really?
So
Can we talk about potty training again?
But I don't want to do that. Like,
do we want to go back?
Who am I? Like, it doesn't. Just one person too, but it's.
Well, I'd be curious to see what makes you hopeful. Like, I thought that conversation with Roger was like, he's extremely optimistic about the future. And I imagine all of you are, or I hope all of you are as well. What are you seeing that makes you hopeful? Where in from your perspective, who's really driving that innovation, that integrative thinking that he's talking about? What are your thoughts?
All right, I'll go first. Okay. So what makes me truly hopeful is okay, let's say we picked up no-till, we went strip-till, which was completely new to the area. Targeted spraying, like all these things we're supposed to be doing, like planting green, which we don't do often anymore, but just covers in general, all that stuff, longer crop rotations. I start to see other farms around me or other farm businesses copying me or copying my dad and I.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's really awesome.
That is awesome.
Like you see this ground pounder for, it's fun to do, but this big chunk of iron that is absolutely just destroying everything we're trying to do. So, like, opposite end of the spectrum, that thing's gone. And now this operation strip tills, they no-till beans, they're growing wheat for the first time in 30 years.
Oh, wow.
That gives me that's really, but that was really cool. Like, that's really awesome. That gives me hope, because other people are realizing that we can take on a little bit more friction or expense, and our quality of life and our quality of farm business doesn't suffer. Or if it does, we learn how to manage that bit and just kind of go around it. And the best part is those these farms around us who are starting to copy, they didn't use any programs to do it. The incentive was, my neighbor is successful.
Yeah.
And he's going home sooner. And he gets this, like all the quality of life things that come with this. And I was like, that's like, it's an incredible sense of validation.
Yep.
And we weren't even like looking for that.
That's brilliant.
It feels good.
Yeah. Cher, where do you see from your perspective, what's hopeful?
You know what's hopeful is I've now been doing sustainable food for 20 years. And when I started this journey, nobody even knew what sustainability meant. They thought I was pretty crazy in my words and my thinking. And now it really is becoming the normal. And what I'm most hopeful about is this transition between sustainability and now even taking it a notch above and starting to think about the circular economy and the circular transformations of the businesses, right? And when we think about circular economy, and so this is really about being inspired by nature's natural systems. It reimagines and regenerates the systems that feed us. It eliminates waste. It creates economic prosperity, and it takes care of our communities, right? The circular economy becomes the friction that Roger was talking about, so that we say, well, how long can we keep these resources in the system, even though it's cheaper to throw them away, right? That's what makes me hopeful, is that there's this notion that we can actually go even above and beyond sustainability, and that sustainability is now becoming a common language across the board. That's what I'm excited about.
Crystal?
I'm an optimist by nature, and so obviously that's why I work in agriculture and with you good people. And I would say, without even realizing it, farmers are equipped for this job and challenge, right? You're in a continuous improvement. Since the very first person poked a soil with a sharp stick and dropped a seed in it, it's next year we're going to breed better crops, and we're just hardwired for that. So that's, first of all, we have the right people with the right brain power. Secondly, when we look at what we need to be successful, we need collaboration and problem solvers. And when I travel outside of Canada and the US to other countries, they're like, you can get the whole food system together in a room to have a conversation. Like, we can't even get all of dairy in a room or all of grain in a room. So we are light years ahead of the rest of the world in our organizational structure and ability to come together at events like this and to come together with other supply chain partners. So I think we have the right opportunities to collaborate, and we have the most excellent brain power on the planet that can really take on these challenges to be successful. And I get up every morning saying I'm grateful to work in this sector for a reason. I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with what everybody said. Very hopeful, and I think there's a lot of positives associated with agriculture. That the future is bright, and the changes that have occurred, and COVID might be part of the changes. I think that there's more agreement to be working across the whole supply chain than there might have been before, and this idea of local, and I think because it's been difficult to identify a single metric for that gaming the system within agriculture, that we haven't had the problems that Roger talks about in his book. That's the foundation. Instead, it's like there's so many things that are part of a natural system that farmers deal with, rather than a physical model, an economic model that Roger talks about. That we are already constantly adapting, and whether it to be to environmental pressures or other forms of market pressures, I think agriculture is in a good place to do so. And I think particularly Ontario, given how the nature of our climate, we're much more resilient to or not prone to the same extremes that other places are. I think we're in excellent shape.
And we can grow an incredibly wide amount of things. Mm-hmm. Like, we have resiliency within the crops we can grow. Like, we're not tied to corn. Yeah. As much as people want to be tied to corn, we're not. Like, yeah. I don't want it. Like, if I don't have to grow corn in 10 years, ooh, that'd be awesome. What? I want to be home in November.
Yeah. John, what do you think? I could ask one more question, or
I think we got time for one more question.
Time for one more. Well, it really was just to summarize all this conversation, and after reading the reading Roger's book, what was that kind of that take home message for you that you'd want to pass on to our listeners? I hope you don't have to think about it too long, because we don't.
Like, my takeaway would be a lot of like, just don't be afraid to take on some friction. Just because we have a certain process, or we're doing something and it's worked for a year, 5, 10 years, like, ask for an opinion from some, like Roger. It was perfect. Like Roger saying, like, go ask some other people, like, what am I missing, or what do you think?
Yeah.
And take something out of that discussion, and take it in, make it yours, and apply it to what you're doing, because all of a sudden things will get better or change for the better. Or they'll reaffirm what you're already doing, which is great.
Anyone else chime in? Or
I'm happy to go. I love this notion of tweak, try, tweak, right? This concept of getting better every day at everything that we do, and there is no right answer. It's just this constant improvement. That was sort of the big takeaway for me in his book.
Yeah,
it was a great book.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I do hope that everyone does read it. I really got that he was writing this out of a respect for capitalism and democracy, and really saw that there is like a threat to it right now, and it has brought about such good things. It's almost saving it from itself. So we need to look at where were the unintended consequences, where can we improve the model, for the sake of everyone and for the sake of democratic capitalism, not as we know it, as it could be.
Because it's supposed to be a societal good, not a business good.
Yeah.
This whole system, for all of us.
Yes, it was so big in its vision, and also very helpful for our small businesses, but big. Crystal, or anyone to finish up?
I would just say I really loved the model of the rules to break the rules, and it's okay to do so, and to just say you already have a continuous mindset mind, because otherwise you wouldn't be at a cover crops conference. So to say, okay, now let's go to the next level and say not just a percentage improvement, but say let's break the rules and say, how can we reframe the end game, the end goals? What's our new goals, and can they be bigger and better than our existing things we're chasing?
Totally. Okay, John, I'll let you pop in and shut this party down.
Well, I don't,
Thanks, everyone, though. That was awesome.
I mean, no one wants to be that person,
thank you,
right?
Everyone.
But my mind is swimming. I don't know about you in the audience, but the ideas, the questions, and the thoughts, I hope you're also feeling the same. This has been very stimulating, and I keep coming back to this idea. Well, what do we do next? And where I keep landing is, let's not what we heard tonight. Explore those ideas and think about and talk with people about this, how you can work together to turn those ideas into action, and then commit with others in that community to help drive change. Push them a bit, and it led to a lively and engaging conversation. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let's think about what Roger talked about how do we take those and come up with something new that reflects a creative way of solving a problem that isn't about a this or a that. It's a melding of those things. I'd also like to again thank the OAC, the Ontario Agricultural College Class of '59, and the Future Thinkers Fund. Without their support, we wouldn't have been able to have Roger here and be able to host this panel, so we really appreciate it. And I'd especially like to send a shout out and a thanks to the Midwest Cover Crop Council for willingness to partner with us on this event and on this keynote conversation. It's a great way to bring people together from the Midwest part of the continent and to talk about such an important issue.
Thanks for listening to Food Farm Talk on 93.3 FM CFRU in Guelph, or on podcast. Please check our podcast show notes and social media for links to Roger Martin's work, the Midwest Cover Crop Council, and Soils at Guelph at the University of Guelph. A special thanks to Cam Ogilvie of Soils at Guelph for making these audio files available from this lecture. Please tune in again for another topical episode.